Good morning, everybody, and we're going to head back up to our project. It's kind of a crappy day here in SoCal. We've got even my night light is back on the shop, and it's already about 7 o'clock in the morning. But anyways, I'm going to head up there and get started on our project again. It looks like we'll probably get around to some painting today. Here's my back lot. This is where the driveway and everything I made. And I got the RZ trailer around the back side of the shop there. And my poor little on-site shop. Got the compressor mounted outside with a waterproof shroud, which is really nice. And I've actually sound insulated that. And the auto drain down there at the bottom of the tank. I ran that through a hose and into this planter, and there's a muffler right there, and it's been working pretty good. My neighbors haven't complained, and the compressor runs quiet, so we're good there. Well, here's a familiar sight. And we get all the switches turned on. And we can come over here and air up the shop. And there goes the compressor. Well, from last night, we took out our parts and I think we were doing a quick check over on the table. There you can see a pile of the crud I've been scraping off this thing. I've been filling up a bucket with all the crap. I start with a putty knife, and then a wire brush, and then a wire wheel, and then I get down to old crappy paint, and then that's a separate process that I do. Yeah, I was doing a test fit here. I'm getting these holes lined up, this hole lined up with this slot, and when I'm done I want to get these two sides cleaned up and get them kind of even with each other. And I was also considering drilling and tapping two holes in this so I can run a couple of long all threaded bolts through here. If I ever clamp in a small part over here, I can run those bolts in to keep this jaw parallel. When it comes in, it's only riding on one bolt here, and it's just going to kind of follow what anything does. So if I put a very small part in over here, the jaws are going to come in and turn like that and not hold the part securely. If I give you two screws right here, threaded, we can jack this side of the jaw out and hold the jaws parallel, so your little part that's hanging out here to be cut will still be held securely. So I think I'm going to go ahead and get a couple of threaded holes in here, one high, one low. And this is the one we squared up last night, and I did check it with a precision square. And I did a less of a step over here, and this hasn't even been polished. It's but there's nothing there. I mean, you can see where the mill overlapped, but I've got nothing I can even catch a fingernail on. So that's that was the key, that problem I was having with that yesterday and all that polish work I had to do. Alright, so that's where we're at with this. This one still hasn't been cut, but what I'm going to do is get these lined up and figure out how much I'm going to take off of these edges, and I'll probably just use like a round over mill and give it a nice curve on the back there. And one that matches over here. So this will be, I'll do a round over here and a round over here and get them cut true. Alright, so that's my next setup. Okay, so I've already clamped this in. And this time I'm clamped up nice and high. This cut's going to be easy, but the next one, not so much. So you can see when I flip that big web right there is going to be in the way. So that's going to be interesting to cut. So this thing's set up to cut, and I've already indicated it in, like I said. And I am going to get creative with the vice grips on the next clamping when this thing gets flipped. And we'll take another look at it when I get this side done and flipped over. Okay, here we are back, and we've already completed the cut back here and got a nice solid surface to clamp to. And as I talked about in my last video, I actually just added some notes in there that I had hindsight and thought a secondary clamp would be better. This piece even more so. I'm doing the round rod trick, tipping the I-beam parallel block, but in addition to that, I've got a C-clamp on each side of this thing holding it into the vise. I was kind of worried about with all this hangover, this part's quite a bit larger. I was worried about it getting chattery out at the open end where I'm getting a lot of overhang. I have indicated it, hoping you can see that. It's about 2 thousandths below zero. I'm going to dial it all the way to the back and make a pass side to side without moving anything. And by the time I get to the back here, I'm right on zero. So I'm going to run it to the right. And side to side, I'm doing pretty good. It was pretty buggered up, and I actually had to stone off the top and knock all the high spots off. I ran an Arkansas stone over it, so I could even get a reading at all. It was pretty bumpy, full of rust and lumps and bumps, and I started with a putty knife and then moved on to a Arkansas stone. So I'm at zero there on the left, and let's traverse over to the right and see where we're at. This thing's actually kind of dished, so it's low in the middle and high at the ends. And right there, let that camera focus maybe. Yeah, you're about 1.5 thousandths below or above. But you're right on zero there, right where the bolt is, and it gets tightened down all the time. Down here in the middle, you're right on zero. Over here, you're on zero, so I'm calling that good. And I'm just thinking that we're low over here for whatever reason. You can I'm hoping you can see this finish. This is the factory finish. It sure looks like a fly cut to me. Big one too. Looks like they did that in a single pass. I'm not up for that. I try to keep high-speed steel off of the cast iron as much as I can. It just wears out too quick. The carbide is just the way to go with cast. Anyways, let's get the indicator off and start making a cut. And so here we are in the middle of this cut. This is the first pass. I'm taking about 10 thousandths off of it, and it's skimming along nicely and no movement. Doesn't sound chattery at all. I haven't gotten out on the edge of the overhang yet, so we don't know what that cut's going to be like. But I've got it clamped in pretty securely. I'm real happy with those grips there, and I should have done that yesterday when I was doing that other piece, and that was bad practice on my part. Do as I say, not as I do. So much for leading by example, right? All right, I'll turn this back on after we're done with this piece, and we'll figure out our next plan of attack. Well, here we are on our last pass. And the way you spin your cutter and the way you approach your work has a lot to do with work holding. That cutter is spinning in this direction. So when looking down on it, we're spinning clockwise, and it's making the cut on this front side facing us. So it's actually pushing the work into the jaw. And if I were to be milling the other direction, I would be pulling it away from the jaw. So when you get into creative work holding, or some would also call this stunt machining, you have to get creative and be very careful with your cuts to make sure you don't loosen the part as you're cutting. Last thing you want to do on a surfacing operation like this is to have the part move on you, and then you end up with something that's bowed or dished or hourglassed or concave, or God forbid falls out of the vise and you break all your carbide off of your cutter or off your face mill or your fly cutter, parts go flying across the room. It gets ugly quick. So anyways, that's the name of that tune. And this thing's going to be squared up and done here, and we're going to work on those sides that were all boogered up. Alright, I'll be back in a few. And here we are back at the part after our last pass. You can see I did a really big overlap. This is just mill finish. I haven't polished anything, but I did a real big overlap. But you can see where the line was going to be, and my last pass was here. So I overlapped that quite a bit, and it took out that ridge. So something else I learned from yesterday. I'm 50 years old and still learning. So I'm going to do the same thing I did on the other ones. Just give it a quick polish with a Scotch-Brite wheel. I've been knocking them down with an Arkansas stone, which is just a whetstone, and then come back with some 320 on a sanding block and give it a quick polish. All right, so stay tuned for my next. Okay, I'm back, and I've got both vise pieces all milled on the faces. Now I'm going to be working on this corner that was all chewed up. And I'm looking at the way that thing was cut, and it had to be making contact when someone was attempting a 45-degree cut or an angled cut by the looks of the way the saw blade entered into the side. In any case, there's a clearance problem that exists, and I'm going to eliminate it. I've got a parallel, or a couple of parallels, clamped in between those vise jaws there to create some clearance. And I've got the two clamped together, and I'm just kind of short bolted down there to the table so I could get an idea of the alignment of the jaws, so I can get them both pretty much the same. So I'm gonna get over on the mill and get creative and get both of these things in the mill at the same time. And we're gonna go back to our, what do we call it, stunt machining. So yeah, next time you see me, we're gonna be getting creative over on the mill. Now I'm back, and in the category for creative work holding, what I did is I flipped the jaws of the vise around. This jaw is removable. It typically resides over here. So you just slip it over here. That gives you a nice flat surface here to index parts. Drop this down, got it tight, caught it on the lip of the vise, everything clamped together, two pieces together, and then the flat side indexed back here on the fixed jaws. And it got real vertical. I had to use a real long cutter, so it was that's a 3/4, so it's the most rigid I have, and it was a little springy, and I had to make a lot of little spring cuts, but I got it. I got these the ends of the vise jaws plowed down. I'm going to do where that chowder is right there. I'm going to do a little corner round right here while it's still set up. I'll just corner around them both at the same time, just roll that edge over, and then I'm thinking about rolling down the back side of each one of these jaws independently, because they are slightly wedged. You can see they're thicker on the bottom than they are on the top. So I try to index along this edge and run a quarter round down there, and then polish out the grooves, because you're going up against a rough cast iron casting, and it wouldn't blend too well. So it's going to have to be hand blended if you're going to do it. Alright, so that's the next step, but that was my creative work holding, and it worked fine. I got it machined. I had to do everything by hand, so I couldn't really use any of the table auto feed, so I couldn't film it doing it for you. I don't have a good tripod like a lot of these guys. This is being done on my cell phone. Alrighty, back in a minute with a corner round. And here we are back. I've got my jaws done and radiused. It's got a nice clean radius across the top, and I've just blended it in with the die grinder and Scotch-Brite and sanding wheels. So I didn't get all of that little booger out of there, but I'm okay with that. I ended up taking about 1/10 of an inch off the side of both of those, and I still have left my two jacking screws that I wanted to get in the jaws, one high, one low, and that's going to be easy enough. I'm just going to do that with one piece. I've put my vise back in a conventional way. Got the jaws off the back, put them back in the front. Got a pair of parallels in there. Just going to hang this out the side a little bit where I can get in here and drill and tap there. Clamp it down. No more stunt machine work. We're back to conventional methods. Anyways, that's the rounding bit. I was going to leave that in there. It works a lot like a router. It does a quarter round on a part. Real simple. But next step is just to drill a couple 3/8 national course on that side there. I'll show you drilling and tapping those. I'm just going to get it done, and these I'm trying to get some paint work done today. I'm going to get these machined, cleaned, masked, and ready for paint. Alrighty, and I'll probably show you some of the stuff hanging in the air. I'm not going to show you me painting, and painting's pretty boring. That's my least favorite part of a project. Alright, so here's my little jacking setup on the movable jaws. And what this allows you to do is chuck up very small pieces of stock and make very small cuts. If these weren't there when you bring the lead screw in, this the movable jaw would want to tilt and spit your part out. But with those jacking bolts, you can easily adjust it, keep your jaws parallel, keep your part clamped, and get your cut done. Alright? So that's the theory behind that. So that's done. Those never have to come off again. It is painting time. So I'm going to do a bunch of prep and a bunch of wire wheeling. And that's the name of that tune. Next time you come back, you'll see some parts hanging in the air and probably painted. Thanks. And here's an end of the day shot. Main upper is clean and hanging, but not painted. Cable was taped and painted. Gear drive painted. Vices painted. This was my stumbling block. There was a lot of rust on the legs, so I shot them with a red oxide primer, and it ain't drying. Period. I sprayed those about 6 hours ago, so I can't recoat that. So I can't spray my gray yet. I got stuff hanging here, drive wheels, and down feed. Over on the bench, I've got all the shrouds. These are still got to be prepped. And there's the guide rollers for the saw blade. And I got the 2 shrouds that are in pretty good shape. One of them, there's a weld broken. I got to fix a weld there on the belt guard and bang out that sheet metal a little bit and straighten it up a little bit. There's the blade guards there, and they're clean and straight. That's the main reason I bought this machine, because everything was there. It was complete in all respects. And this is all I got left on the cart. But there's a cart full of fun. Everything in there, it's going to need to be cleaned, straightened, de-rusted, painted, and brought back to original condition. Then my last hurdle is that little motor. The motor runs, but I think there's a thrust bearing out of it. I haven't decided what I'm going to do with the motor yet. I've got a half-horse Dayton single phase. I might just stick on there and be done with it. If I feel adventurous, I'll get into that motor and rip it apart. But that's the shot for the end of the day. It was just cleaning and painting all day long.